We miss you, Martin. You who gave so much. You who gave your all. Tried to teach us, reach us in ways that would prepare us for this day. Yet, here we stand, praying for someone with your spirit, or simply just someone just like you. Somehow we pray that you draw us nearer to sanity, dignity, humanity, even beyond the grave. Did we miss the lesson? Or are we simply supposed to go through this time that seems so outrageous? This time, 50 years later, despite your caution of why we can't wait. Yet pause seems the only answer. A pause that has caused not just a people, but a nation to lose so much, to reel on the edge of sanity, dignity, humanity. We missed it, Martin. We missed it. Come back. Teach us again. Tunneling through, around, over, and even under.
The minute he asks, is that something new? We say, what?
Hello, welcome to Sojourn with Words. I'm your host, Sistah Joy, and we are in studio today with the none other than Michaela Lacy. Now, for those of you who know that name, and she's definitely been about town for quite a while now, Michaela Lacy is the newly appointed Youth Poet Laureate of Prince George's County. She is actually a transplant from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She recently relocated to Prince George's County, and upon arriving, one of the first things that happened, shortly thereafter, I should say, a few months after arriving, she competed and was selected as the Youth Poet Laureate among 13. Yes, 13 poets. Now, she has been involved in the arts and activism since a young age and hopes to deepen her involvement over time. Michaela, welcome to Sojourn with Words.
Thank you for having me, Sistah Joy.
Absolutely. Now, this soft-spoken young lady, trust me, when the poetry happens, she just transforms into a powerhouse of a poet. I'm so blessed to have witnessed a couple of times now the poetry of Michaela Lacy. Now, Michaela, I understand you are a 3-time Grand Slam champion, as well as a former captain of your own poetry team, Sacred Garden. Tell us about Sacred Garden.
Well, Sacred Garden was actually a separate from my poetry team. My poetry team was through my high school. Sacred Garden was an open mic that I co-founded with a friend of mine when I was 15. Yes, ma'am. And when I turned 18 and moved here, I passed it on to a friend of mine. But it is one of the first youth-ran open mics in Milwaukee. It's been running for going on 3 years, and it just brings together every art form, every age group, every bracket of activism as well as art, and we just come together, have a great time, and just connect with each other through art, poetry, rap, singing, dancing, everything under the umbrella of art. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Diversity
now,
and
this is still happening in Wisconsin.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is there any opportunity for the poetry community here in Prince George's County to connect with that experience?
Well, I absolutely plan on making a second SG here eventually.
Okay,
I'm
SG, Secret Garden.
Sacred Garden.
Sacred
yes,
Garden.
Yes,
Sacred Garden.
we call it. I'm used to calling it SG,
Okay.
but I definitely plan on making a SG 2.0. Should I say?
Okay. Okay.
Sometime within the year. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, when we talk about poetry, you're all of 18, so many years under your belt. But truthfully, you have been mentored and coached and groomed to be an accomplished spoken word artist. Tell us about what that was like as a young person, albeit not here in Prince George's County, but somebody saw something in you. And what do you think that was about? Why you?
Dasha Kelly. I have to say that name wherever I go, and wherever I carry my art, I also carry Miss Dasha. She is one of the most powerful women in Milwaukee, if I do say so myself. She started a nonprofit organization called Stillwater's Collective, and it gathered every high school in the Milwaukee community to get the youth poets to compete and discuss panels and do workshops. And she kind of showed me the ropes and showed me what it meant to mix professionalism with poetry, spoken word with written poetry. And ever since, I've just become more seasoned, I would say. I definitely have a long ways to go, but I believe that I've increased dramatically as an artist because of Dasha Kelly. So I know that poetry is like the root of my existence, but I also know that Dasha has played a large role in my presence as a spoken word artist.
Okay. Well, now you reference spoken word artist, but your writing is a significant thing for anybody who is familiar with your work. I was highly impressed when I first heard you, and I wondered, what was it that brought you to writing, which for any poet has to be significant. Spoken word can be about performance if one so chooses, but that was not your approach, because clearly you have something to say, and you say it well.
Thank you.
So with writing, were you always into writing? Was it always poetry?
I believe that as far back as I can remember, I've always been a writer. And
did you journal?
Yes, ma'am. I've always had a diary on me, and I believe that maybe when I was in about the 5th or the 6th grade, writing just kind of fell into my spirit. Like, poetry was something that I found myself doing without being instructed, without being coached, without being introduced to it. It just kind of came to me. And when I got into high school, I started studying more like forms of poetry to make it more structured. But from like my middle school until high school, I was always very adamant about expressing my trauma through poetry. I didn't feel like I could communicate it in any other way. And I knew that poetry was a device in which you can be completely unapologetic, be completely thought-provoking, and people will definitely listen to you if words are put in a poetic format. And so it's been my defense mechanism and my coping mechanism for quite some time now. So my writing is a reflection of what I've been through and how I communicate what I've been through.
Now, I hear you talk about structure and form, which any poet worth their grain of salt understands the significance of that. But oftentimes, a lot of people may think that, well, they're just talking about what they feel. They're going on emotions only. Tell us about, when you talk about the poetry form, and I mean, we know that it's an art form and you have to craft your product, which is the poem. So it's not just what you feel on today and goes on the paper. What forms, what tools, what mechanisms are you focusing on when you craft your poetry?
Well, for one, addressing the ideology that poetry is strictly emotion and it's formless and things like that. I completely disagree. I believe that every poet strives their best to make their trauma into this masterpiece, into this striking eye-catching, ear-catching piece of work. I most definitely believe that thought and cadence and rhythm and things like that are definitely thought about when writing, and especially with my poetry. Off top, I would say that sonnets and things like, I believe the word is etapaphs, and poetry of those sorts, and free verse poetry have most definitely kind of established how I like to write and how I like to use form. There are most definitely other forms that I've been studying, but those three are the ones that I use to ground me and discipline me in my writing process.
So now I hear you talk about your trauma, and today we hear so much about young people experiencing trauma. We know it's real, it's happening. What is it that you would recommend, say, to parents of young children who may have hurt or pain or confusion? What do you say to that young person to bring them to poetry?
I believe that the most valuable lesson that I've learned in my journey of performing, writing, and expressing my trauma through poetry is that your voice will always be the tool that tells people that what you have to say is valid and what you have to say is true. And I believe that it was Zora Neale Hurston who said that if you don't speak about your trauma, they can kill you and say that you enjoyed it. And I feel like if we do not advocate for ourselves, if we do not speak for ourselves, if we do not demand that our voices are heard, then no one will have the empathy or the decency to consider us and help us and reach out to us. And yes, this world is absolutely unfair for not being able to have that natural empathy, but to just know that what you are saying is right there on that paper, in that mic, in those ears, in front of that audience, just assures that you matter in that moment. So make yourself believe that you matter. Make yourself believe that you are worthy.
Okay, well, certainly your poetry does that. It is not something that you simply share in a very lackluster manner. Your words, your passion, your power, you're convicted through the words that you're sharing, and clearly you labor to create them in a way that allows even the person who's not familiar with the subject matter to understand that this person cares about what she's saying, and she's saying it in a very a way that allows others to come to understand that point of view. Let's take a moment now to hear some poetry from Michaela Lacy. She is one who has found her voice. She is an advocate for encouraging young persons to find their voice as well. But she brings all generations to poetry because her messages truly are universal. We're looking forward to hearing one poem in particular that I love. I think is it Black Boy?
Yes, ma'am.
Black Boy is one of my favorites. We're going to hear that momentarily. And we're looking forward to know. Now, how can our guest be in touch with you? Is there an email address or a website?
I have email address. I also have a phone number that I try my best to answer.
What's the email address?
Lacy, Lacy dot Michaela, Michaela dot D @gmail.com.
@gmail.com. Okay, well, hopefully we can get those generated on the screen so people can be in touch with you. We want the community to know that we have a poet laureate, a youth poet laureate of Prince George's County, Michaela Lacy. For those who tuned in late, we want to now have a few poems that we can hear and hopefully allow our viewing audience to understand what all the buzz is about from Michaela Lacy. And this is through the Dialect. Tell us about Dialect real quick.
Dialect USA was founded by Mr. Patrick Washington. He is a man in search of youth poets, youth activists, youth writers to use their voices to advocate for the progress of PG County in particular.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Poetry time.
All right. I wonder, was God in the room? Were chairs set aside for 16 angels to watch and guide you in execution of this ritual, did you wash your hands first? Pour 3 times into your right, then rub the soap unto your left. Did you raise your hands in prayer before you raised them at her face when my great-grandmother walked into your bedroom? Did she mistake the candles lit for romantic purposes when you slapped her? Did her chest cave in as if her soul was being ripped from its vessel when you made a sacrifice out of my great-grandmother's body? Did she fall to her knees for your mercy? Did you forgive her? For the bloodstain she left on your floor, did you forgive her? For the shriek she pierced your ear holes with, did you forgive her? For whatever made you do it in the first place, did you know that your hands came with a ripple effect? That your slaps could be felt on the faces of your descendants 4 generations later? Did you know that you breathed life into a demon that would haunt the bedrooms of all the women in your bloodline? Did you know that you marked a blueprint for men to love your granddaughters the right way in the tradition of men in my blood? The man that I loved left a bruise on my face, and I still loved him after. Consumed by the belly of an untaught ritual, swallowed whole by a man, craving to make me half a woman, raised to fill up shoes but to never take up space in the tradition of women in my blood, I fell to my knees at him, kneeled in my own blood pool and sought forgiveness. Wiped the mark from my cheek with bare hands and a closed fist, repented for a sin I knew not I was committing. I wonder, was God in the room to witness the heathen I had made of myself to the man who laid my body at an altar and made my offering out of my skin? Did you know you remind me of my great-grandfather, a butcher, able to shed the skin of women only using his bare hands when you made a sacrifice out of my body? Did you know that I'd still love you after? Did you know that me still loving you after had nothing to do with me still loving you after? I just don't know how to break tradition. Did you know that I am sick of the women in my bloodline never being able to break tradition, passing down battle scars like sweet potato pie recipes, never tasting the salt that forms in your mouth when a man makes a ritual out of your body to the man who walked in the blood trails of my great-grandfather? Did you know that my hands held history? And when I slapped you back, did you know that my great-grandmother rose from a chair just to watch me? I am so sorry that I made a sacrifice out of your body. I just had to break tradition, had to mark a blueprint for men to love my granddaughters the right way, had to assure that no more women in my blood would be cursed by a man like my great-grandfather. 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, a big yard and a big kitchen. Good neighborhood. Crime rate low, no police knocking on doors round foe trying to catch a murderer, dealer, rapist, a thief. All you hear is grasshoppers and new cars rolling around on non-crack streets. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? It was perfect, wasn't it? Or was it? I mean, sure, we didn't have high crime and crack pipes flooding street corners and hoes. We didn't have busted tail lights, street fights, or liquor stores, or prostitutes whose legs don't close till I was past 11. We were a household of 7, 4 girls, 1 boy, a dropout, and a reverend. Dressed to kill when we entered every setting, pressed suits, church shoes, and department store dresses. We had it made, or so it seemed. See, we were good at covering our garb with peaches and cream, perceived to be living the dream, set out to succeed, but living in that house taught me it was easy to deceive my father. Prime example of a black man defeated. Prime example of a black man oppressed. Battled with the worst, but still flaunted like the best. He was wrecked, always coming up with quick come-ups and scambles, denying any task he was too weak to handle, like fatherhood, like marriage, like companionship, like caring, like committing. The only thing he ever stuck to was his lies and religion, overly religious. But I wonder which God abided him, beating his children and his women. He was a monster. We were ripped, starved, and singed, but had more welts on our hearts than the scars on our skin. He sprinkled holy water to cover his sins, had the whole world fooled. They never wondered what's within that 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom. A big yard and a big kitchen. Bedrooms lacking heat, kitchen had no food in it. And if you identify with Christian, God is my witness. I cried in that place so much my misery was sickening. Going to school, hanging with chicks I didn't like.
kissing up and getting close just so I could spend the night anywhere but there. No electricity or lights, anything but seeing my mama and daddy fight. Our life was hell behind those doors. No food in our stomach, sleeping on the floor, father beating on my mom, cheating, chasing after whores. I will never forget the time when I was 4 and I woke to my mother screaming, said, I can't take this no more, forget you, Cecil, I'm leaving. I couldn't believe it, I was finally free of that 4-bedroom graveyard, sitting on 9 cracked streets, now living in a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, big yard and a big kitchen. Grease stains behind the stove, couple flow towels missing, rough neighborhood, crime rate high, men with too much pride to work a 9 to 5, so they ride hitting stains to get by, but I love it. I love the ghetto. Ain't met a place more real. The streets is pure truth. They never worried about appeal, and it's real, and I love it. Thank you. This is an ode to black boys. He was born weighing 5.972 sextillion metric tons and 4 ounces. His bronze-colored skin could sink Titanics, throw the galaxy's gravity off balance, and when he died, his casket left dents on the shoulders of every man who carried it. Took 10 landfills to bury him. He cried his way into this world with a sound that resembled an old church hymn. His life, a song composed with an untuned organ played only at black funerals. He grew to stand behind the lines of his ancestors before him. Went from crawling to marching, into tradition, fit right into funeral procession placement, knowing that he would soon trade places with his cousins, uncles, brothers, friends. Tell me, what weighs heavier than a black man's casket? Other than his mother's heart as she watched the world she birthed be lowered back into the ground aside from his father's head that hangs lower than branches from charred poplar trees aside from his grandmother's croon, her vocals lower than 6 feet beneath the hole her womb dug for an offspring, and you deny her creation. You call him thug. You call him nigger. You don't call him planet. You don't look up when you speak to him. Tell me a black boy ain't earth when he can make everything around him grow. Tell me, if a black boy ain't earth, why people see green when they stare at him? Tell me, if a black boy ain't earth, why people keep taking from him? When his roots sink deeper than the hatred printed on his birth certificate, tell me a black boy ain't a prophet for globalization. Tell me that a black boy dies, they don't call it corruption in the ozone layer. Tell me one blow to a black man's chest won't start a forest fire. Tell me with a straight face that a black man's blood don't darken and be the dirt that holds the seeds on this here ground, like you can't find all 7 continents laying in between his 7 cornrows, as if the tectonic plates ain't plated in his scalp, as if the Atlantic oceans don't form into hurricanes when he apply his wave grease. Tell me a black boy ain't earth. And I'll ask you, have you ever read between the lines of the National Geographic? Do you know what earthquakes really look like? Have you ever asked its mother? Did you know that tornadoes have their father's hair and share their uncle's eulogy? Tell me a black boy ain't earth, and I'll hand you a map and call it his obituary.
It might seem like we're trying to rock the mic. The real deal is we're trying to fight the good fight. Lifting verse opens minds, sometimes opens doors, brings news, heartfelt views from our world to yours. We don't simply speak for ourselves when we write, but for weary warriors who fought day and night. We speak for the silent, the misunderstood too. We speak to inform those who don't have a clue. We speak for battered lives and tossed aside seniors. We speak with teens on self-esteem in crucial in-between years. We speak for honored champions who toiled and paid their dues, for those depressed and still in pain, for those fighting the blues. We also speak to lift a praise and to celebrate, and yes, to share the good news, because his love is great. So when we put our pen to page, like blood our feelings flow. And when we walk out on that stage, we speak of what we know. You see, life is our practice every day. We rehearse. This craft is our sacred gift, built strong verse by verse by verse. Each time we pick up the mic, we defeat adversity. Each time we pick up the mic, we claim a victory. Each time we pick up the mic, a soul could be set free. Each time we pick up the mic, we fulfill our destiny. Some may call it rock the mic. We call it poetry.
Well, that concludes this episode of Sojourn with Words. Thank you for tuning in. We are thrilled to have with us as our featured poet for this episode, Youth Poet Laureate Michaela Lacy. And we hope that you'll be in touch with her and let her know what you think about her poetry as well. Tune in whenever you can right here on CTV, and know that Prince George's County brings the best poetry anywhere.
Listen, can you hear it? It's there, scratching just below the surface, from the underside, trying to break you free. Your realities of possibilities have lain dormant long enough. They're ready now to awaken, spring to life. They await only your head nod of permission to walk through the door to which only you hold the key. They are scratching at the surface from the underside, trying to break through to that glorious and powerful future bearing your name. Look closer. Can't you see? Feel them clearing out the debris of hesitation and doubt, making way for your new day. Yesterday has held you at bay long enough, kept your vision blocked, your dreams sequestered, locked away in that no man's land of untapped possibility. But today, your dreams are alive, scratching at the surface from the underside, champing at the bit. They're poised to do more than make raucous noise, as just another rowdy voice in the wilderness, ready to fall for the okey-doke of following the crowd. You stopped following the crowd long ago, so now it's your turn to take the lead, blaze the trail no one else can see. This is the road with your name on it. So go ahead, assume what destiny has held in wait just for you. Take the lead the charge of waymakers and game changers. Show the world not just what possibility looks like, but what blazing brilliance and dogged determination feel like. Yours is the phenomenon of new dynamics, a new universe where success after success unfolds. Know that your story must be told in the key of your voice. The only one that can give you permission is you. Walk into your own future. Welcome, my young champion, to your new tomorrow, made by years of preparation, yours and those who came before. This is the domain where you make realities happen. You open the door, scrape off the barnacles and parasites that have leached on to you. Free yourself from the confines of ignorance and fear. This is the day you take the shackles and blinders off. Success is no longer scratching just below the surface. It is being born today. Welcome. Walk now with vision beyond eyesight. That new and powerful thing you see is you. Welcome to life.